So let's start with something easy.
Sure.
So what's a day in the studio like for you?
Well, every day is different. It just kind of depends on what shows I have coming up or what work I have on the go. If I have like a unique public art commission or something. So, but I usually start my day around 8 or 9 and finish around 4:30 or 5, depending upon if when I have to pick up my child from childcare. So the childcare situation kind of helps you to keep it as a standard like 9 to 5 job. Of course, then I usually go back into the studio when he goes to bed. In terms of work, I start off answering some emails or doing some social media posts, and then get into the work, whether I have work in progress or starting new pieces. And then sometimes a day in my studio is also out exploring and getting inspiration. So it's not always painting. Sometimes it's, hiking or traveling or going for a walk or going downtown to get kind of the right city photo. So it's forever changing. And with that too, with the photos, when I'm taking photos of my work, I'll do a lot of nighttime photo work. So it could be, that sweet light hour or that twilight hour, or right in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m. when nobody's out. So just depends. Each day is different.
So how has COVID changed or influenced your practice?
I think the biggest change with COVID I found was just not being able to go and jump on, pack my bags and go on a flight somewhere when I was, looking for inspiration. So I think that has, been a different challenge to kind of look more local or look more inner. So I'm finding that I'm reflecting a lot on the subject matter in a different way that maybe I've had in the past, and kind of relying on a little bit of memory as well as, doing some more local traveling. So you'll probably notice a lot more sort of nature over the last year, as well as I started doing florals. Over the year, I was like, I need color. So I would go on occasion and purchase some flowers from my local flower shop, and the colors just kind of excited me. And I never thought I would try my hand at doing some floral paintings, but here you go, got inspired by.
So you say that why never? Do you give yourself rules for what you're going to paint? Like, there's so many different subjects that this latest body touches on, right? You have your landscape, you have your cityscapes, and then now this new departure, which is florals. So why didn't you allow yourself to do it before?
It just wasn't a direction or something that I had thought of as a subject matter for myself. It has nothing to do with, I don't know why, really. I know a couple of years ago, I was on a helicopter tour with that I looked at the Purcell Mountain ranges. So I was able to go on this really cool hike, and I discovered this really cool up close withered tree, and I fell in love with it, and kind of a grouping of them, and took a lot of up close photographs where you had the background kind of blurred. And I think that helped me kind of go more up close. I think my past images and landscapes had always been from a perspective at a distance. And I think that like just discovering some of those past several years ago then opened up new subject matter for me, in terms of the florals being more of an up close subject matter than kind of like a stepping away from a distance.
That makes sense.
And I've seen that happen before, like with waves. Like for instance, I have a couple of water waves crashing paintings, and I had actually started obsessing over those photos that I've taken on, trips to Mexico or Hawaii or the West Coast or East Coast of Canada. And those images took a while for me to paint too. So sometimes I'm excited by it in the moment of traveling, but it might take years and years for it to kind of start coming into my practice.
So what role does photography play then? So it's like, it seems to me that you're dealing with like this idea of nostalgia in the way that you're looking back at these photos that you've taken before, and almost like you have this new opportunity where you're focusing yourself inward more. So does nostalgia play a role in what you're looking at?
Totally. Nostalgia, the narrative. I think it's like an inner feeling and a vibe. Like when I go and take photographs, like I don't necessarily take photographs with the intent of making a painting per se. I go to experience travel or experience the city, and from that I look back on old images, and I don't really know what direction that's going to take, but I'll collage and montage images together. So I started out very old school, where I print them all out, lay them all across my studio, and I cut and collage them together and create like a little mini collage of images. And I love that they're never one specific location. So I like to shy away from this is, this exact street corner. But rather it might be like a building from San Francisco, one from Calgary, Winnipeg, New York, wherever, and just kind of montage it together. Or waterfalls or landscapes as well. It's never necessarily one specific location.
Yeah, so instead of creating these like specific images, you're creating these more like imagined places.
Yeah, it's kind of like a build your own adventure, sort of like it's is real, but not at the same time. So I will rely on, the photographs for composition and light and kind of like scale. But then because I'm an artist, rather than just depicting an exact scene, I can play around and manipulate that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So do you also use found images then?
I tend to shy away from using others' work. I just have a preference to use my own. Not completely opposed to it, but I sometimes will look at like satellite imagery and stuff, but I prefer my own, because as an artist, when you're photographing work, you just have a different eye and different vision and a different, like I will get into really weird positions to get my photos. Like I'll lie on the floors and I'll squat down really weird and low, and just a different vantage point that, others in their photos don't necessarily think of to do.
Yeah, you have your own perspective, right? And it's translated through how the photograph. And I think sometimes what's interesting about using your own photographs is that a good photograph doesn't necessarily make a good painting. Even you could use a bad photograph to make a bad photograph, to make a gorgeous painting when you combine them all together, like you're talking about in your collage process.
Totally. And I'm not necessarily the most technically proficient photographer, although I know a lot about it. I remember going on a hike with this one gentleman who was more technically, like he was setting up, the tripod to set up every shot and had to get the light a certain way. And he would look at me like I would just like bend down, click and go. And then I'd send him my photos later, just as like, hey, this is what I took. And he's like, oh, because I was more interested in the light. So he's like, you actually got like more emotional photos, because that's what I'm more after. I can fix some of the lighting situations in the studio post, like when I'm painting. So I don't have to have it perfect. I'm more about the composition.
Yeah, because like the invention comes through your painting process.
Totally. Yeah.
So from like heavy impasto juxtaposed with your very smooth surfaces to sometimes you include sculptural elements in your work. It seems like your work really does probe the possibilities of painting. And I'm wondering what drives you to push these elements of painting?
Curiosity. So as an artist, I find like when you're faced with a blank canvas, so everybody gets a blank canvas to start with, what do? Right? So we have color, we have texture, we have paint, we have subject, we have so many things to play with that my mind's always racing. So I'm always super curious, and I like to push mediums to their limits or do things that are unexpected that maybe are not typical use. Like I was doing some resin work years ago a year or two ago, where I would do isolated resin, which is incredibly difficult to do. And it's only on part of the paintings, where a lot of artists would do resin over the whole piece. So I'd be like, well, how can I push that and, challenge myself to do something slightly different with it? Behind me is actually one of my 3-dimensional pieces that I did on aluminum for a series, where I was influenced by reading pop-up books to my child when he was super young. And then I thought, oh, how can I do that with the painting? So that from a distance, it looks like one image, but as you get up closer, here I can show you, you start to see.
Yeah, show us if you don't mind. I'm familiar with them because we have them at the gallery, but.
Yeah, so you can see there's a space between the piece and then they become one. So it's just curiosity. I'm always playing. I love the different textures. I love that when somebody looks at a piece, they're going to see something different every time. I think as an artist, we have a visual challenge of holding people's attention span. And I've always wanted to create a painting that you'll look at for more than 30 seconds. Like, you got to look at my pieces and then you can look again and see something entirely different. Maybe it's the thick blobby texture one time, or the soft kind of ethereal marks in the background another time. So yeah.
Well, thank you for your answer. Maybe just talking a bit technically more, what's your favorite or most important artist tool? Like, how do you arrive at those different?
Should I be super ambiguous and say it's my mind?
I mean, you could. It's your answer.
Why I want to say that is because, of course, you need the right tool to do the job, but you need to have the idea of how you want to apply that paint. So I will use everything from my finger to, the hardware store is a great place to go and find like these weird things that would make marks, or, paintbrushes, airbrushing. So it's whatever I want to do to get that combination of textures. There's definitely specific brushes that are kind of my go-to brushes that I love, and specific palette knives that I like for different reasons. But if you came into my studio, I'd probably have like hundreds of brushes, and I have like hundreds of palette knives and different types of paints. You have to really know, like, there's different materials that have specific uses. And then also taking those and creating something different with it. So yeah, I don't really have like a specific, I need this tool, but yeah, they're all important. You need them all.
I think the brain is the best tool.
Yeah.
So speaking of brains, do you always feel like painting, or do you ever get in the way of yourself?
Well, I think I would be not human to say that we love it every day. Not that we don't, just some days, maybe you're having like, some days I literally will like drop the paintbrush with paint on it like all the time. And I'm going, what is going on? So you're just not coordinated that day. But that being said, I do find sometimes the best things are achieved with a slight bit of frustration in art. So it's a really useful thing to be slightly frustrated. Not that you want to be all the time. And then if you're just not feeling it for that specific day, like, there's always something to do in the studio.
Yeah. So how do you overcome it?
I'll just go to the studio no matter what every day and just start stretching canvas, or if it's a beautiful day, just take 20 minutes and go for a walk, just kind of recharge. But there's always something to do, whether it's, answering emails or doing the business side of it, or social side, or in terms of physically painting. You could do some busy work if you just think you're going to wreck everything, or just dive in and wreck it, because what's the big deal if you do? Just rip it up and throw it away, or do like little tests.
Yeah, I learned that in art school. I remember I had this professor who was like, I was struggling with a painting, blah, blah, blah. And he came up and he painted an orange stripe down the middle of my painting. And he's like, I've created a problem and now you have to solve it. And I was like, oh, this is like fascinating. So it's like, here you have these frustrations, but it becomes a way to kind of get you to work around them or work through them.
And often I work on several at a time. So I don't focus all of my energy on one painting at a time. And I think that helps you shift, because if you're come up against a roadblock on one, then just go to the other one and hopefully your mind will resolve it. Sometimes I find as an artist, like, even I'll wake up from a dream and I'll be like, oh, solve that problem. Like, your mind's always working. So yeah, I just take advantage of that, I guess.
I like that. So even dreams influence you.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Are there any other sort of particular lived experiences or memories that inform your work? Or do you rely more heavily on like research?
Well, I think I mentioned that like I travel a lot, or I did travel a lot post COVID. And that helped influence. I think that just gets you excited. And I think that maintaining that excitement as a person, I think just helps you create like that emotion then goes into your work. Um, so I don't necessarily research a ton. I rely on like experiences. So those experiences can be simple moments, though. It could be like I was sitting in a condo that I was at my friend's house, and the light was peering through it and going through trees and creating this weird pattern. So I'll be like, oh, just a second, I know we're talking, but I have to take some photos. Or my husband, he'll be like, when we're watching a show or a movie, he'll be like, okay, because I'll stop, pause, take some notes, or like write something down, snap a photo of the screen, just feel good. I'll be like, that is a cool concept. And I might do something with it, and I might never do anything with it. But if I don't write it down, then I find that it doesn't go anywhere. So I'll have like a little sketchbook often where I just kind of write ideas down or sketch notes, and I may never look at those again. But I find that if an idea keeps on popping up, then it's something I need to try out in the studio.
Yeah, something you need to pay attention to. So we
Totally.
talked a lot about like your beginnings of painting. What about the end? How do you know a painting's finished?
It's a good question. It's intuitive. Because my work is very planned in the beginning. I will, like I mentioned, the photos, and then I do like large scale drawings, and I do color compositions. And then I put a lot of that aside and let just my memory and my feeling of what I wanted to accomplish kind of take over. And then there's some intuition when I'm doing that like textural components on it, just to kind of put the last, I guess, exclamation mark on the piece. So it's a long-winded answer, but it's intuitive. And I would rather stop a painting like 5% too early than be 1% over. You don't want to be overdone, overworked. So, and then sometimes I find that I think it's done, and then I don't usually post those images right away or send them out to a collector right away, because I want it to just sit with me for a minute, because then as I'm walking around my studio, I glance at the work that I've just completed. And then maybe a week or two later, I'll be like, oh, I need to do this, because you just need to reevaluate what you've done.
Well, like how you photograph environments, it's about getting a different perspective on it. It's almost like you have to trick yourself into looking at it in a new way.
Yeah, it's like an active and a passive sort of thing. You're active with when you're doing it, and then you're passively kind of thinking about it after it's done. And then you might go in and tweak something or not. And I have gone in and tweaked something and wish I hadn't. So you have to be very careful.
I can understand that frustration. So maybe let's talk about what art means to you. So do you think it's important to understand the meaning of a work of art? And what does your art mean to you?
Yes and no, I guess. When I look at others' work, I tend to be more of a technical artist. So I'm always like looking at the technique side of it. So I'm not necessarily going like, why did the artist create it? Although sometimes I am. I think that art, it's for a couple of reasons. Like as an artist, I feel an inclination to produce. And when I'm not making something with my hands, like painting wise, I'm like, picking out cool things for my home, or I'm like making cool cakes for my son, or I'm like doing crafts. So it's like a need to do something with my hands and my mind, and it usually is creative. So that art is important from that standpoint of, as a maker has to make. And then I think art also plays a vital role in just uplifting an environment. So I think like, having original art or having art in your home means a lot to the environment. Or, going to a public art gallery or gallery space or an office that has artwork in it. I think it just enriches the environment, and I think that it creates some conversations. So maybe it makes people ask why. I don't tend to be too specific on the places that I paint is because I want the audience to engage with my work and kind of come to their own conclusions a little bit. And I think that that's important to give the viewer something to exercise their mind. So it's not just oh, I see an apple. Okay, it's an apple, moving on, right? So,
well, it places trust in your audience, right? You're allowing them agency to sort of start to read in what they would like to into your works. And that makes me think back to how you've spoken about how these spaces are in your latest work are like these more constructed spaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you experienced any memorable responses to your work?
Yeah, there's been a few.
You mind sharing?
Like, children are always hilarious. Like, I feel like you can tell whether a child is more like scientific or more artistic because their responses are just priceless. So like a lot of times they'll look at my work and think it's like candy and blobs, and they'll love the texture and the color, and that a more engineering sort of mind of a child will be like, I don't get it, which is cute. And then it's important to challenge that, right? One incredibly memorable experience I had one time is I walked into an art opening, and a lady had just had eye surgery. So she was not able to see color in the same way that we all, like that the average person sees color. And she was just starting to, after the surgery, get her color back. And she was standing in front of one of my pieces and crying. And I walked up to her and was like, everything okay? And then she shared her experience, and she's like, the colors are just so vibrant that they were overwhelming her because she had never experienced that from a sensation before. And it was incredible just to like hear her journey and just hear that connection with the work. And of course she purchased it for her room because she felt like it was an important kind of experience, but not that you have to, purchase the work if you have a feeling like that. But it's just incredible. So I've had many experiences like that, that, art creates a connection to, an emotion that you might have that might be different than what I did when I created it. But it's really cool how it's just all very, I don't know, just flows, and we all experience art in a different way.
Have you ever experienced not looking at your own art, but do you have a favorite artwork that you love, or have you had a similar experience where you felt like you were seeing color for the first time?
I was in San Francisco and I saw a Rothko piece in person, and I'd always loved his work when I was in high school, and just very different than what I was creating, like more photorealistic portraiture or like my work that's, looks like something. But I was always reading about like they kind of talk a lot in the art history books about like the spirituality of the pieces. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, Then I went to it and I was like, they vibrate like nothing else in person. And the scale of the pieces that you often don't get on, online or in a book, is pretty incredible. So I remember just sitting there and you're just like, wow, like I never thought that I would have had, I thought I would have been like appreciative of it, but I never thought that I would have had this like weird reaction where you're like, oh.
Visceral, right?
Yeah, totally. And there's lots of artists that I've had opposite reactions to, where it's like, I loved your work in the books, and then I went and saw it in person. I was a little bit underwhelmed, and I was like, oh, that sucks. But I think it's because color shifts and changes, and I don't know, like maybe my expectations or what I had built up to it was something different. But I would say every piece of artwork has something really fantastic about it. So but yeah, like I think it's just like the scale. I think some of the older masterpieces I thought were bigger, and then I'm like, oh, they're small.
And you're like, oh, it's actually this big.
This big. I wanted it to be massive. Or there's I forget his name, but I was in London. He's a watercolor artist, and his light is just so Turner, right? Yeah, and his light is just so fantastic that I was like in awe, just like looking at like how he was doing all these washes, and the fact that he was doing it when he was doing it, it just makes it even that much more important. But
yeah, absolutely. So you went to art school. You have obviously a great knowledge of art history. What do you think? What did you learn in art school? Do you think attending art school is a must for today's artists?
oh, those are all good questions, and I think very personal. I think every artist is going to have a different path.
Mhm.
My path in art school in high school, and even before that, I had attended like Emma Lake International Art Conferences. So I learned a lot of different techniques, but like bronze casting, painting, woodworking. Then I went to high school art, where we were very photorealism. So it was about making something look exactly like something, like copying a magazine or some kind of an image. And that was really great from a technical standpoint. Then I went to art school and I was like, hey, what's this? Art school, for the school that I chose,
Mhm.
was more about the why you paint rather than how you paint. So I was really fortunate that I had the background of this is how. And
Yeah,
then in art school, I was really able to explore why. And I think why is very important, or was for me at that point in my education. Yeah, so I kind of focused on why I paint, what I want to paint, and what is it that I'm trying to say. And I think that that was a crucial piece for me in terms of, does an artist need to go to art school in order to paint? I think that no. I think that every artist can just pick up materials and start using it. But I think that art school allotted the time to fully concentrate on what I needed to do. Like, and I think that that time is very crucial. So I would definitely suggest like thinking about art school if you want to make it as a full-time artist. Again, you don't have to, lots of artists don't. So I think it just depends on what gap you have in your knowledge base and what direction you think you want to go.
so you also worked in an art gallery. How do you think that helped shape your art career?
Well, I worked in an art gallery and I also worked in an art store. Uh, so art gallery was great to see from the perspective of the business side of it.
Mhm.
Just understanding, how to be an entrepreneur as an artist, what all the work that goes into at the gallery, like how much work goes on behind the scenes that maybe collectors and artists don't see. We thank you for being able to do that so that we can concentrate on, or I can concentrate my time on painting, which is what I would rather be doing. So it was really important to see from that perspective. And then working at an art supply store was fantastic because I literally bought everything.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because you have this knowledge and familiarity with multiple materials, right?
Yeah, and then it's also my curiosity and just from the scientific side, like I need to know like every material that's in it and what color, the components of the colors in it, so that like how's that going to react with the tone color, and how's that going to react with me putting, as a mixed media artist, you have to really understand how to layer things and why you layer things for the longevity of the piece. So yeah, all of that was great knowledge for me. So I guess you could just work at an art store, art school, and avoid school. But
Like you said, there are many paths to becoming an artist.
totally,
Uh,
totally.
so what's the best piece of advice you've been given as an artist?
Depends on what perspective. So from an instructor, I
Mhm.
was once told to paint like you're rich and worry about the rest later, meaning don't be skimpy on your paint. which you can see through my work, I've taken that seriously to
Yeah,
heart.
I see that
And
you have that license.
I use a lot of material. From a gallery, one time I talked about like how to stay relevant. I think that that's an important factor as an artist. Like, how is your work gonna maintain sort of that relevancy in the current world? So don't stay stagnant, I guess, is what I take from that. Make sure you're constantly growing, trying new things, and not being stuck in like one specific thing.
That makes sense. Do you collect art yourself?
Starting to more. It's kind of like the dentist has the kids have the worst teeth situation sometimes.
Feel that. I don't hang any art at home.
You don't? Oh. Yeah. And often my art gets taken off my walls sometimes if a gallery shows up. They're like, oh, I'll just that one.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice that you would give to new collectors?
Oh, buy what you love and buy what you can afford, I guess. Yeah. Some artists, I guess it's like a more astute collector might, be buying for investment purposes, and a kind of newer collector might just be buying for what matches their couch, and it's all relevant and all great.
Yeah, those are all valid reasons we say here at the gallery.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? Not everything needs to be an investment, but it's also very important for you to like the work, even if it is an investment.
I would say so. I think the artist would hope so.
Well, I'm sure all your collectors believe in you.
Yeah.
We're at 1:30, so I'm going to maybe wind down and
Sure.
open the chat to some questions. If you have any questions, would you just please type them in the chat and I can relay them. And I'll see if I can unmute. So we'll just wait a few moments. So yeah, I'm not able to unmute you. So if you have a question, just type it in the chat and Sheila and I can answer your question. Sheila, do you ever have a hard time letting go of your paintings?
Yes. So there's been one or two over the years that I just had a connection with that I have kept. Sometimes I'll keep them for a little bit longer and then send them on their way. I find that if I hold on to too many pieces, then I don't have room to make more. So it's a good thing to kind of let go a little bit. But yeah, sometimes some are harder than others. But I mean, the intent of making them too has always been to share them with the world. So that makes it a little easier too. Mm-hmm. And I have to pay for more paint. So.
Absolutely. So on that note, someone's already asking about the painting behind you. What is it called?
I forget. I will look that up for you. I will send that information in. But yeah, it was part of a series that I worked on. So there's only, I think, about 10 or 11 of them out there in the world.
Yeah, we have some of them at the gallery.
Yeah. I think I had said the idea, we had worked on some for Art Toronto a few years ago. Yeah. That's
awesome. So Josie, I hope that answers your question.
Sorry.
Also, if you want to check out our website to see more of Sheila's work, I believe we have her sculptural paintings listed as well. So maybe just a funny question. Do you follow the art world at all? Like you're talking about how to stay relevant. Are there any trends you've noticed and are paying attention to?
Yes. And I do follow the art world. I do. It's funny, when I was in art school, I didn't. I felt like I needed to block the world out so that I didn't get unduly influenced, because it's really hard to create an aesthetic that's uniquely your own. Mm-hmm. But then after art school and now, I definitely look at kind of what is trending, what some of my other artists in the same galleries are doing, or other artists that I just respect, that I respect their work of. It kind of goes, it depends, because I look at like everything from realistic artists to artists that paint completely abstract. So I look at trends, but I ultimately feel like if you're an artist trying to jump on the trend, the trend bandwagon, that's maybe not I don't know if that's a great path, or at least it's not the right path for me. So I'd rather create consistent and work that inspires me as well.
That's wonderful, Sheila.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you might want to mention now that we're closing up the chat?
No, just that I hope you enjoy the work, whether you see it online or in person. I hope that there's maybe time to create a little mini video or something that we can post of the work in online. And yeah, no, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day.
Well,
And
thank
if you
you.
ever have questions, just, shoot the gallery an email or text or send an email to me or over social media, and happy to answer.
So available, Sheila. I love it.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll just let you know that the talk has been recorded and it will be posted later. Thank you so much, Lynette, for your comment. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, check out, if you're in Winnipeg, please visit Sheila's show at our Tuxedo location. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.